Good afternoon, and welcome to the August 18th meeting of the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee. First order of business is, yes, Mr.
Go ahead. First order of business?
Yeah, don't do this. That's cruel.
I'm sorry, I'm getting ready for raising my hand for the first order of business.
Oh, okay. Identify conflicts of interest? Yes, go ahead.
Just for full disclosure, I know that we're talking about health insurance, and I know that the recommendation, or at least the discussion, will be involving security health plan, and I do work for the health system, so I don't know that there's technically a conflict of interest, but for full disclosure, I want to make sure that that's known. And if the committee would have concern, I would be happy to not be a part of the discussion or the vote thereof. So I'll leave it up to the committee to decide.
Thank you. I think the ruling on that has always been, if you or your family do not directly benefit from it, you're okay.
Okay.
That's my understanding.
Then if there are no concerns, I will go ahead and participate.
Okay. Anybody else? If not, we're up to citizen comments. Are there any people in the community who would like to come in and address the committee? Yes, ma'am. Come to the podium and identify yourself and tell us what's on your mind.
Hi, my name is Jenny Jerschley. Do you need my address?
Oh, please. Yes.
2308 East Fillmore Street. So you're probably wondering why I'm here and why I've been creeping at your meetings the last couple of weeks. I'm just interested in getting more involved with the city. I am a Marshfield native. I grew up here and I recently moved back to Marshfield last year. And one of the reasons I'm interested in this committee is because my professional experience is in government human resources and finance and budget. So this seemed like a good place for me to start getting interested in city government. Anyway, I wanted to talk about your ordinance to create an ethics board. I am very much a proponent of transparency and accountability in government. I was a state employee for 15 years, so I have had a lot of experience in that regard. Most recently, in my state employment, I was the Chief Human Resources Officer of the Wisconsin Department of Health Services. So I oversaw human resources for DHS. We had about 6,000 employees. I had a team of 40 people. I have a lot of experience in, working in investigations and hearings as it relates to ethics and employee matters. And I just wanted to volunteer my services in helping you draft with any kind of drafting work that you would need in regards to putting an ethics board ordinance together. I have experience writing state statute and administrative code. So I'd be really happy to offer my assistance in that regard. I have reviewed the draft ordinance as it's written. I have some questions. I'm not sure if this would be the right place to address them or if it would be easier maybe to do like a phone call or something outside. I'm not sure with whoever drafted this to begin with.
I would be very interested in hearing your comments now if you would feel free to do it.
Sure. Let me grab the paper.
Without any objections from the committee?
No.
Now, I'm going to preface this by saying that I tried to look at the municipal code and I saw that it wasn't as relevant to this ordinance as I thought. And so Steve Barg was nice enough to send me chapter 3 of your, I think it's, let me.
It's actually one of our policies.
Yes,
Yeah.
one of your policies. Yep, they're not on the web, so I wasn't.
It should be 3.310 and
3.34.
3.34, right.
Yeah, they're not on the web, so I wasn't able to look and get the full background in this. But
Okay.
Just based on my experience, I had a couple of questions for you. So first of all, I was kind of wondering, this chapter seems to be broad in that it encompasses employees, appointed officials, and elected officials.
Which one are you talking about? 3.31?
The draft ordinance.
Which one?
The draft
Oh,
ordinance.
the draft. Okay, go ahead. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And that it covers employees, appointed officials, and elected officials. And I was wondering why employees were included. Is there not a separate employee investigation misconduct procedure for employees.
I think you've got an older copy of the draft because you raised a very good question.
Okay.
There is a 3.310, basically is a code of conduct for employees, and that is administered by the city administrator and the health and the human resources director. Realizing that, in the last draft of it, that I just sent out the other day, it completely eliminates any reference to the code of conduct and sticks strictly with 3.34. And then, so yeah, good catch. That
Okay.
You got it exactly right.
Okay, good. Thank you. The next thing I was wondering was, so the draft as written, and forgive me if you've made updates and I haven't seen them yet. But as it's written, I was wondering why it seems to be so specific in terms of procedure. So for instance, it has a procedure for, basically it laid out like a criminal proceeding. And I was just wondering what the thought was behind that, because it seems to me that many of the items that constitute an ethical violation under this ordinance as it's written are also considered to be criminal under state statute. And this is not a criminal court. So I was wondering what the thought process was behind that type of hearing procedure.
Well, I'm really glad you asked that because basically this ordinance was a clip and paste job from several different ordinances that are already in effect. And this one, I think the city of Fond du Lac was one of them, and I'm trying to remember the other city that was, Steve. There were 6 others, but one other had like the exact same language as Fond du Lac.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason they had done that appeared to be that they wanted to make sure that the process was so tight that nobody went around that process. And I think now there's a possibility that there is a version that I put in the first one that was an alternative version. I don't know if you saw that.
Mm-hmm.
That came from another city which they name it as a criminal procedure, but they don't go get into the specificity. And that is an option for us to adopt if we want to do it.
Okay.
So, and you're absolutely right. It is the same. It is the same as a criminal proceeding.
If I could offer a bit of advice based on my experience in these types of areas, sometimes it is beneficial to write something that gives direction, but isn't so specific that it cannot ever be adapted to different situations. And so I think that perhaps a less specific procedure might be beneficial. So in that regard, because you can never really predict every type of situation that's going to come in front of you in something like this, right?
That's correct.
You want to have your procedures be specific enough that everyone can be on the same page and following them, but not so specific that it prevents you from adequately doing what you're setting out to do.
Right.
So if I could offer that bit of advice. That's
well received. Thank you very much.
The next bit of advice that I would like to offer is has to do with the timeline set forth in the procedures.
Yeah.
First of all, I want to say that I'm happy to see those. I think that these types of complaints need to be handled in a timely manner. So I was happy to see those, but I'm wondering if they are going to be too restrictive. Just knowing that these types of meetings tend to happen on a pretty regimented schedule. Sometimes it's hard to do things within like 30 days or 60 days. So my recommendation would be to bump all those dates out an extra 30 days. So maybe go 60, 90, 120 instead of 30, 60, 90, just to give you more of an opportunity to make scheduling happen. And then have more time to gather information if you need to. And then secondly, I was wondering about the investigations. So it talks in here about the committee doing a full investigation. And what resources will the committee have to do that? And what type of investigation are you envisioning the committee to do?
Basically, it's a fact-finding situation.
So
Excuse me?
are you envisioning like members of the committee actually going out and interviewing witnesses or that kind of a thing?
No, we'll be asking for help from the local police department if we could. The other thing is that the investigation could take the form of a hearing. And as you probably saw, there's a provision in there under 88501 of the state statutes. And by the way, every chairman of every city committee has the same power right now because it's in the statutes. And that is that they can subpoena witnesses and documents, and they can swear people in, they can put people under oath for testimony. So that's what I envision being the most thing if they're doing an investigation. Okay, you claim this, who saw it, who did it, whatever. You can subpoena those people, bring them in and have them testify under oath. And I think that would take care of most of it, as near as I can tell. I think if there was some specialized stuff, you could probably ask the police department to assist, or you could ask the HR department to assist in the investigation also.
Okay.
The HR director would serve staff. But you're right. It is a major part of what happens in the investigation of an ethics violation. You're absolutely correct.
Okay, and then another question that I have is, it has to do with appointed officials versus elected officials.
Right.
And so I assume by appointed officials, you mean, for example, people who are appointed to a board or a committee who aren't like an alderman.
Right. Well, no, they could be citizens that are appointed to.
Yes.
Right.
A citizen who's appointed, but not elected.
Right.
So in that case, are you holding citizens to the same standard as an elected official in the sense that you're only going to look at what is required by state statute for an ethics investigation? Or are you going to have a broader set of criteria for appointed citizens? Let me give you an example.
Please do.
Let's say you have a citizen who is appointed to the board who has been accused of sexually harassing someone else on a committee. Now, under the state statute of ethics, that would not be an ethics violation. But is that something that you would like to have the ethics board be able to have power to investigate for an appointed official?
As I envisioned it, yes, but you seem to have some doubts about that. Can I hear those?
Well, it's not written that way in the ordinance, so that's why I was asking.
Okay.
And forgive my ignorance on this. Like I said,
You're putting me to shame. I love it.
Well, I haven't had an opportunity. I mean, I don't have access to all of the city's policies to cross-reference, but are appointed officials, do they serve at the pleasure of the mayor? So the mayor could release them from their appointment at any time? I'm used to working with state appointed officials. They serve at the pleasure of the governor. So let's say you're the Secretary of Transportation. At any time, the governor could say, thank you for your service, goodbye. Or if you were involved in some sort of ethics issue, I have investigated appointed officials who have been involved in ethics issues where we've done our investigation and submitted them to the governor and they've said, yep, you're right, bye-bye. It's a different standard than elected officials are held to.
Right. It's a little cloudy here, and I think we just last council meeting, we went through something like that of who appoints, and it comes down to who nominates and who appoints, and pretty much the mayor nominates and the council approves in most things, isn't it, Steve? Are there any exceptions to that?
Yes.
Yeah, that is the common way that we approach it.
Okay, so yes,
Utility Commission is the one except.
oh yeah, Utility Commission, they are exceptional in every way, so.
I guess the reason I'm asking is because as the ordinance is written, if you had a situation where like an appointed official was accused of sexual harassment or maybe discrimination, that wouldn't fall under the purview of the statute for an ethics violation, but it might be something that the ethics board still might want to pursue an investigation on for an
Right.
appointed official. And so it might be worth looking at this ordinance and opening it up for that, because we're still thinking about the conduct of the people who are representing the leadership of our city.
I would be happy to talk more about this with you too, and my phone number is in the city directory, and I would be happy to entertain a call anytime.
Okay.
So and I really appreciate your expertise. I really do.
All right. Well, thank you for your time.
And thank you, and I hope to see you more involved in government.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other citizen comments? Steve, go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to follow up on what Jenny said a minute ago, just to let you know. I will send you a copy of that latest, draft from the chairman. It came out, I think, on Friday, and I didn't get it out to you. And even though I know you're interested, I sent it out to the media and others. But also just let you know, all the city policies, maybe I didn't say it to you in a previous email, they're all on the city website, but they're under staff resources. So you have to scroll on the bottom. They're in the same category where there's things like forms and policy issues that deal specifically with employees. But that's where you'll find that section 3 that has the policies that include the ethics policy for public officials.
Okay, next order of business is consent agenda. Minutes of the July 30th, 2020 meeting, minutes of the August 4th, 2020 regular meeting, bills and payroll, report of personnel actions, July treasury report. What's your wishes? Motion by Paschal, second by Barrows. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, so carried. Next up is request to recommend approval of 2021 employee health insurance plan presented by Jen Raku. Jen, it's all yours.
Thank you. So as you see in your packet, we've received our health plan renewal quote from Security Health Plan. And as you probably noticed, our utilization rate has continued to go down over the past several years. So currently we're actually at a medical loss ratio rate of 85.7. Again, lowest that we've seen in quite some time. So in working with Security Health Plan, we did some negotiating with them in terms of what our renewal rate would be. And what they came back with after some negotiation was a 3.45% increase. That's with no changes to our plan design or any modifications to the plan whatsoever. So if we were to utilize that increase of 3.45% on a monthly basis based on our plan today, that's an increase of just over $9,000 a month, or annually approximately $110,000 per year. The one thing that we want to look to add this year is a secondary plan. As you might remember, last year was the first year that we went to just a full HSA plan. So in this, high deductible health plan with an HSA to be specific. So what the second plan that we'd like to add is an exact duplicate of the plan that we currently have. So it would still be a high deductible health plan with an HSA. However, what this plan would offer would be a narrow network. It's called Simply One. And what that means is Security Health Plan would work with the Marshfield Clinic, and as long as you received all of your services through Marshfield Clinic, they would all be in-network options. In looking at our utilization for the past several years, it's been very consistent, well over 90% in terms of the amount of spend that we have of our current health plan at the Marshfield Clinic. And so with that, we feel that this might be a valuable option for our employees to potentially reduce their costs. So if you look at the cost of the Simply One plan, it's actually 8.91% below what our current rate is. And so what we tried to do in your packet is review the plan to say, we don't know who's going to enroll in what plan yet. But in the event that we would have 75% of our staff stay with the current plan and 25% go to the Simply One plan, our renewal rate is almost even. It would be a 0.039%. And again, we can't guarantee those numbers. But if we had 50% on, our renewal rate overall as a city would be 2.67% below our current spend. And if only 25% stayed with our current plan, but 75% went to the Simply One, it would be a renewal cost of 5.85% to the negative. So again, it's a potential way for us to save money as a city. It's a way for our employees to potentially save money based on their preference and still give them an option with our current plan to go to whatever network they feel comfortable with. So based on that, we don't feel that with these two options that there's a need to go out for bid for 2021, like we'd initially thought we might need to. We're comfortable with these plans and we're requesting approval to renew the health plan for 2021 with Security Health Plan offering the two plan options that we've talked about, our current high deductible health plan with an HSA and the Simply One plan option.
What's your pleasure? We have a motion. Motion by Paschal.
I'll make a motion to approve the 2021 employee health insurance plan.
Is there a second?
I'll second to get discussion going.
Mr. Witzel, discussion? Mr. Witzel?
What is the current split, city to employee, the cost of health insurance?
85-15.
And I'm assuming that that percentage would stay the same regardless of which plan an employee chose.
Correct.
So do we have a ballpark of what we're thinking the savings to the employee would be? Get in the memo here unless I missed
Yeah, I did not calculate that out in advance, but if you look at the overall spend, if we're looking at the 3.45% being at about 110,000, just for easy numbers, if we rounded that down, we're talking about, 15,000 saved for the city or for the employees in total
per year,
and 85,000 for the city.
Okay. Because I think it's each employee is going to be probably looking at these two options long and hard. And if the savings really isn't there for the employee, they're not going to want to change. But if there's a significant enough the savings, I think for the employee, going to be more interest to then potentially change. So I wanted to make sure that I understood that part of it. Thank you.
Any other comments? Are you ready to vote? The motion is to approve the renew the 2021 health plan with Security Health and option the two plan options, including our current high deductible health plan and Simply One plan option. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? So carried. You didn't lose your place, Jan. You're up next. Request for approval of the employee retirement loan option.
Thank you. So recently, the reason why this is coming before you is I had an employee contact me who is going through some hardships due to COVID-19 and how it's affected their family. And one of the things that employee requested was whether or not they could look at anything related to the CARES Act and with our nationwide 457B deferred comp program. And so we did look at the request and worked with Nationwide to understand what provisions might be available. And so under the CARES Act, due to COVID, there were three benefits that basically come along with the 457B. So it could be a tax-favored coronavirus-related distribution, up to $100,000 for employees through the end of the year, expanded access for employees to loans for 180 days after the enactment of the law, and then a waiver of the 2020 required minimum distribution. So in order for an employee to qualify for these benefits, they would have to either be diagnosed with COVID, their spouse or dependent would have to be diagnosed with COVID, or they were experiencing an adverse financial consequence as a result of being quarantined, furloughed, laid off, having work hours reduced, being unable to work due to lack of child care due to COVID-19, closed or closure or reduction in hours of a business-owned property operated by the individual due to COVID-19. And so in looking at those, in order to make this opportunity for our employees to obtain loans through the nationwide 457B deferred contribution plan, we actually have to have a written plan change document. So what I did in looking at this is I did reach out to Nationwide just to understand what would the consequences to the city be if we offered this to our employees. And ultimately, what was shared back is that there are no consequences. This is really just a benefit to our employees. There's no additional cost. There's no funds that the city would pick up. Any consequence to the employee would really come in the form of a tax implication that they may have. But ultimately, this would allow them to withdraw money from the funds that they've already contributed into that 457 plan. So in talking with Eric, our nationwide representative, he said that he's seen a lot of municipalities go forward with this. I know it's something that we always kind of look to see, do we want to lead the pack with this, but it's not. So at this point, I don't see that there's anything negative that would come from entering into this provision, and staff is recommending approval to implement the coronavirus-related distribution and enhanced loan provisions of the 457B deferred comp plan made available under the CARES Act with Nationwide.
Okay. Motion? Oh, Becky, and second by? Oh, sorry, Mr. Peschel. I'm a little confused on this. They can take a loan from that fund. They have to pay it back. And if they don't, that the tax consequences are,
correct.
That's what's going on?
Correct.
Okay.
This would allow them access to take a loan, kind of an easier method to get a loan due to coronavirus versus having to do a hardship withdrawal, which has penalties to it if they would take it from that manner. So this really gives them a better opportunity if they're financially impacted to be able to obtain their money.
Mr. Alman wants to be recognized. Mr. Alman, please.
I was just going to ask Jen, my question is, where does the employer authorization fit here? Because I think that's available to individuals. So couldn't an individual take it, or are you saying that we need some authorization at the plan level to allow them?
There needs to be a plan amendment in order for them to be able to offer this for our employees. So that's what we're requesting.
Okay, thank you.
So we have a motion and a second to amend the plan to allow for the COVID-19 loans. Discussion, any other discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, I think we already did this, discuss draft ordinance, creating an ethics board. I'll open it up for any discussions. Otherwise, I sent out the new ones. The big changes are that there's a resolution creating that amends city policy, and there's an ordinance that makes an ethics committee a standing committee. So you got two different documents there. The wording is almost the same. There were a couple of things that were changed. One was to compensate the members of the committee at the same rate, at the same per diem rate that the council gets. So that would be like $50 a meeting that they would get. We're asking people to, hopefully very professional people to spend their time on this, and I want to put that in there. I wasn't going to ask for any passage of this tonight. I would just ask again to put it out there, let you see it, and I want to hear what you have to say. At some point in time, I'll ask you to authorize me to send this to HAP for final drafting. He's already looked over one, and a lot of his changes are already in here. If aside from that, I'm just anxious to hear what you have to say about it. So does anybody have anything to add? By the way, you did a wonderful job, by the way. So, anybody? Mr. Alman.
I was going to let the council members go first. I did read quite a bit. What seems to be missing from this is, when I read the process for filing a complaint, it's the board shall accept from any person a written verified complaint. And then from there, it's either you have an ethics violation or you're found not guilty of an ethics violation. And it seems like there should be a third group of something so minor or, that it shouldn't even rise, should be dismissed before it gets to it, And I'm sure you can think of just some example where someone wanted to vent, they file a complaint, and now we have an outstanding ethics complaint against a council member or an elected official that may have no merit or little merit. That's my one comment.
Yeah, basically it's set up that there's a preliminary hearing and they can dismiss or find probable cause. And then if there's probable cause, then they can call for a full hearing. The preliminary hearing would probably be without the accused, and the verified complaint, they have to sign it and swear to it essentially. And then submit it to, I think it goes through the city clerk, who then submits it to the head of the ethics board. Yeah, and there are, if there is a hearing and they found that the ethics violation did occur, they can recommend to the council that the person be sanctioned. And it's the council that decides what the sanction is. The sanction can be removal from a committee, or it could be removal from the council, theoretically, if it was a council member. Or it could be a reprimand, a public reprimand, a private reprimand, censure, whatever. There are the whole range of things. They're the same things that are listed in the censure section of the employee, what do you call it, the code of conduct. So that's the range of things that can happen. So it was meant to come back to make the council the absolute authority on it, so that if the council wanted to override what could happen, they could also do that.
Correct, I understand that. I'm just saying at the intake step, there should be some kind of vetting procedure that meets some minimum requirement for a.
Yeah, I thought the preliminary was that, but I'll take a look at it again.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for bringing that up. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Is there any limit on who can file a complaint? Does it have to be a resident of the city, or can it be any outstanding individual? I just think that, we've had some instances happen in the past where, for example, my email box got filled up with people from out east because they were not happy with white tigers. And, if there are people from outside of our community who are looking for an axe to grind or trying to make a statement, but are not affected by anything, can they still make a complaint that could potentially go through this whole process? Or are we really limiting this to people who would be potentially directly affected, meaning people that are within city residents?
To be perfectly honest, I never thought of that. I never thought of anybody that wasn't a city resident being interested in filing an ethics complaint.
People like to stir pot, even if they're not in the city.
Oh.
And I guess from that perspective, we're elected by the city to do business for the city, and the majority of our board members for the various committees and such, there's a policy for the majority of those people, they have to be city residents because they're dealing with things for the city. So I guess from that perspective, it might be an interesting idea to limit who can complain to people that are directly affected, basically being city residents. Now, again, you may have situations where library board has a, larger area. But I think that maybe something that can identify that somebody from Florida who just happens to have an axe to grind can't just throw out a complaint.
I'll take a look at that and see what, I noticed that the other cities that have that basically say anybody
person
can do it.
Okay.
Go ahead, Becky.
Oh, Ron said too. I hadn't really thought of that either, but it does seem like there should be a vetting process before even a committee has to convene on some of these complaints. Because I've heard recently that there's a complaint that someone smiled too much during a meeting. That was a lodged complaint by a citizen. Now that should not be taken to any committee, in my personal opinion. That is one of those axe to grind complaints. And I don't know. I just think that could happen.
Yeah,
it does happen.
Right. Okay. And I'll take a look at that and see what some of the others have done. on that too, okay? There's one thing that's starting to bother me a little bit about it, and that is, something that Dorothy said, is just ringing a bell with me. And that is, yeah, the appointees to the committees would be subject to this ethic ordinance as if, well, they're already subject, basically, the state ethics. If they violate certain laws in behalf of the city, then they're subject to those sanctions he was talking about. I don't want to scare people off from serving on city committees. I really don't want to do that. And I'm afraid maybe these might be, maybe as she mentioned, that very strict code might scare them off. So maybe that's something I should look at again. I don't want to scare people off, but I don't want the committees being a wild, wild west structure either. We can think of situations that have happened within the past 2-3 years where things have happened within committees where the questions were raised and there was no act taken on. My hope would be that the ethics committee would be a short stop to the only other alternative, and that is a criminal investigation through law enforcement. If we can bypass law enforcement and the court system itself, which is a rather expensive process, then I think this would be worthwhile. But let me take a look at that and see how we can keep from scaring off people from serving on city committee. I think a lot of people don't understand how serious this business of government actually is, and how when you're dealing with with the taxpayers' money, how you have a responsibility to act very much in their interest and not in your own. And the things that I'm thinking of that have happened in the past 3 or 4 years, 2 or 3 years, all involve money and taxpayer money, and that's what I think needs to be addressed. So I will take your words under advisement, and I'll work on another draft of this and see if we can. Yeah, go ahead, please.
The only thing I wanted to add is I know I heard Tom's comment in regard to limiting who those complaints will come from. And I'm just really hesitant to do that, only because we have so many surrounding communities where it might not be a Marshfield citizen that would voice a complaint. Maybe they're a business owner, or maybe they have had interaction with someone in the city that they have a concern with. So I think before we go too far with that decision, let's make sure that we think about some options or issues that may surface and make sure that we're making that decision, thinking about who the potential complainants might be. Thanks.
Yes, Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to agree with Jen and what Tom said too. I mean, kind of playing off what Tom said, but I'm with Jen on that one. The word standing comes to mind in a sense. Maybe it's not the traditional standing like you hear in legal cases, but if somebody, is in Wausau, but they own a business here and they've been affected, or they've got some other reason for having been affected, going back to what Tom said, I just don't want somebody in Florida reading in one of our online publications or a newspaper or hearing somewhere that somebody was said to have done something, and I'm filing an ethics complaint. You really don't have any involvement in the city of Marshfield, Wisconsin.
I like your use of the word standing. I think that has a great deal to do with this. I mean, that gives me a starting point, I think. Okay. Any other questions or comments? If not, we'll move on. And I think Mr. Alman is next, isn't he? Yes, Mr. Alman, this is.
Thank you.
You can explain this to us in detail. Thank you.
So thank you. You have a paper copy of my memo. I apologize. I will circulate electronically to this committee and the council also. So you said you want to be kept informed on at least 3 issues: debt, TID, and fund balance. So this is the third of our 3 informational presentations. And really we focus on general fund and debt service fund balance, which are levy funded. Other funds kind of have their own funding source. Special revenue funds such as our communications department, room tax have a special revenue attached to it. Capital projects are usually typically borrowed for or grant funded and then completed. And then enterprise funds, charge a fee. So those are all kind of self-supporting outside of the levy. So what I kind of wanted to walk through is just the components of the fund balance and where we're at. And what I've done is I combined the general fund and the debt service fund balance because they are both levy supported. And as you know, we've been running at a deficit lately, and some of that deficit's been accumulating in the debt service fund. So when we look at these, we have to combine them. So when combined, we have about $6.5 million of fund balance available. And the breakdown of that fund balance is in three categories. Kind of start at the bottom: unassigned, available for any purpose; committed fund balance, which is the continuing appropriations that we carry forward from year to year. And a lot of that is statutorily required for the library. And then some other projects that either got postponed or we're planning ahead. And then the non-spendable fund balance kind of throws this analysis off a little bit because until 2017, the TIDs had negative cash, but it was just all considered unassigned fund balance. So during the cleanup phase, our auditors reclassified any amount that a TID has negative because they don't have their own checking account as non-spendable fund balance. So at the end of 2019, we had $3,616,000 in non-spendable fund balance because two TIDs, TID 5 and TID 7, had a negative balance. And as you recall from our TID presentation, that goes away quickly. By the end of 2021, we expect the TID 7 amount to be zero. And by the end of 2023, even though the TID 5 amount is large, we expect that'll be zero too. So they're paying back substantially. So as that non-spendable fund balance goes down, our unassigned fund balance goes up, and that's good for us. We're trending in the right direction there. And if I recall from our Moody's call today, for 2020, we project that our TIDs will have a surplus of about $1.7 million in 2020. All of them, not just 5 and 7. On the second page, I've got a comparison, kind of a historic of what it looks like. So our policy is that the unassigned fund balance should be between 25 and 30%. And again, by calling this big chunk now non-spendable, it throws it off. But if you look at the far right column, our general fund is at 33%, and even after we reduce it for the deficit in the debt service fund, we would still be in compliance with our policy 25 to 30%. And then the unassigned, those 16 and 12% because of that non-spendable, which again will come back quickly. So if you look at the far right column, it's been fairly steady. We have had some one-time things in 18 and 19 that are helping us out. In 18, we had the large influx due to some finance charges to the TIDs. In 2019, we sold Old City Hall. So we always try to separate the one-time things from the ongoing operational items. And I mentioned that towards the bottom of page 2, some of the things we did, such as the sale of City Hall. We now have admin allocations to our enterprise funds and our TIDs. In 2020, it'll look a little bit better. So non-spendable, again, we say it, like I mentioned, at the end of 2021, TID 7 should be paid off. Into 2023, TID 5 will be paid off. And then those are cash flowing nicely. Some other just fund balance note, since debt service did have a negative balance at the end of 2019, I will bring forward a budget resolution to transfer that amount from general fund to the debt service and just zero out the balance at the beginning of the year. We're also doing a process now, we're almost to the end of for every fund, not just the general fund, we're digging into what's in the fund balance. So if a fund, say it's a special revenue fund, I would say it's a capital project fund. At the end of the year, if it had $30,000 in fund balance, what we're trying to get down to is that $30,000 good because we, saved some money than we expected? Is it okay because we deferred a $30,000 purchase? or is it bad because we actually have more expenses incoming than we can account for? We're going through every single fund so we can answer questions like that. And I think we have 2 more funds to go, and that's been really helpful. We're streamlining the room tax and parks and outlay funds. I just wanted to mention that too. So what happens now is room tax comes in, and it's reserved for capital projects for Parks and Rec. So our old process was really kind of clunky because we'd have some money in our room tax fund, and then we'd transfer some of it to a capital project fund. So we were trying to account for these projects in 2 different funds and transferring money back and forth. So the new process, the spending is going to be the same, the inflow is going to be the same, but we've really kind of simplified how we do it. So the room tax comes into our special revenue fund, 70% goes to the CVB, and 30% goes to the Parks and Rec Capital Outlay Fund. And then it zeroes out at the end of the year. So the special revenue fund has done its purpose. It accounted for that source of revenue. And now we just account for the Parks and Rec projects in the capital project fund instead of, a budget transfers back and forth. So that should be a lot cleaner. And plus it'll give us a clearer picture of what's outstanding for those projects. And with room tax being down so much, we basically, talking to Justin, we deferred a lot of those purchases anyway. So anything we have budgeted for Parks and Rec outlay from those funds, we're holding off to see what the numbers look like. And this is part of our just some of the cleanup things we're doing because January 1, we're switching to a new software package, Tyler Munis Chronos. And we're just trying to get some of these things out of the way. So a lot of work in progress there. Open up for questions on anything with fund balance, on any funds or anything else you got.
Anybody? Just one quick question about that,
Sure.
The park, what did you call that? The,
Parks and Rec Capital Outlay?
yeah, the park, yeah, the room tax, parks capital outlay. That doesn't just sit in there as a lump sum. That is all allocated to different projects within that budget. Isn't that correct?
Correct, yep.
Is there a time limit on when they have to do those projects?
No, they don't. So capital projects are non-lapsing. So if there's money in there, it'll stay in there until the next budget cycle. So what happens now is we try to estimate the amount available just in budgets for projects and programs. And if the money doesn't come through, he just pushes them back to the next year.
And sometimes they also ask for a transfer out of those funds for a project that wasn't allocated, and they do it out of that, right?
Correct. And I think that might go, I'd have to look back, but that might be some of the back and forth that we won't have to do anymore because it'll all be sitting in the capital project funds. But yes, if it would be something significant, you wanted a replacement project, he'd probably request a budget resolution for that.
Yeah, I at one time saw that but this was before I got off the council last time. I think they had something like $300,000 sitting in unexpended funds in that budget. So
correct, and that's why we're doing the reconciliation, because it can be, if you just look at the year-end balance, it can be misleading. And these are 2 of the funds where looking at the balance didn't tell you the whole picture. Because, for example, we had some funds that were negative, but then in early 2020, we got some grant money in that we knew we were getting. It just wasn't reflected in the balance. So that's why we're kind of doing the fund by fund reconciliation. So when you say, oh, we've got $300,000 to spend, we can say, well, no, we don't, because it's accounted for, or we have something.
It was all allocated to other projects, but those projects were sometimes 2 or 3 years old.
Yeah.
That was my
Okay, yep.
point. Okay. Ron, anything else you got? Or Steve, go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to say that in the 2+ years that Ron has been here, he's done some outstanding work for the city. And I think you know about at least some of it, what he went through with the help from our financial advisor on some of the things with the TIF district transfers and so forth. And he's been giving some really good reports here in the last year to the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee about debt, general fund, TIF district status, and those types of things. But I encourage you, if you have any questions, to call him offline and talk with him. He's very receptive to try and answer those. And if there's anything else you'd like to see presented at these meetings that would be helpful to you as you make decisions that we haven't covered, that he hasn't presented to you, please let us know. the intent of these reports is to be informational, but to really help you to prepare for some of the decisions that you have to make in the future.
Thank you, and let me echo that. Thanks, Ron. I appreciate the work you're doing. Okay, next up is, I saw the flash there. Go ahead.
To piggyback off that, I wasn't going to say anything, but since the door was open, I do want to thank you, Ron, for everything that you've done and continue to do. There's something quite rewarding about going to conferences and having people from outside say, wow, that finance director you got is top notch. So you're obviously doing a very good job. These reports are very, very good and understandable for me even. And I think it's great, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is adjourn to closed session under Wisconsin Statutes, number 19.85, sub 1, sub C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. Specifically, an employee request for a leave of absence extension in excess of that provided under City Policy 3.545 and City Policy number 3555. The ink smeared, I'm sorry. We'll entertain a motion to go into closed session, one by Wetzel, second by Russell. Roll call, please. I remember.
Wagner,
Yes,
Paschal,
Yes.
Witzel.
Yes.
And Sparrows.
we are in closed session.